Hi, fourth grade Bloomfield Hills kids. My name is Cass Arsenault, and I am a naturalist at the E.L. Johnson Nature Center. And today we are doing a Q&A with Alan Chartier. And I'm going to have you introduce yourself, Alan.
Yeah, you guys saw me on all the videos, so I'm sure you recognize my face. Yeah, Alan Chartier. I'm the federally licensed bird bander. I've been doing the program at the E.L. Johnson Nature Center since 2006. Unfortunately, we couldn't do this live with all of you this year. I know there's some questions about whether you're going to be able to come out and see the program this year, and unfortunately, that's not the case. It's only a fourth grade program. And so we'll answer your questions that came up during the videos.
Yeah, Alan, we have some really great questions. So the students came in with intriguing questions, thoughtful questions, over 50 questions that we have here. So we thank you all for participating and asking these questions, because Alan would be answering questions when we would do a normal program. But thank you for watching all the videos and then coming up with these questions. So we're going to go through all these right now.
Okay.
So we have some general questions that quite a few students have. They're from Riley M. from Conant, Allie A. from East Hills Middle, Addie K. from Way Elementary, Jordana M. from West Hills Middle, and Lorna H. from Way Elementary. They want to know why do we band birds, and what is the best thing about banding birds?
Yeah, so we did talk about this a little bit in the some of the early lessons. Banding birds is a way to learn more about them. For the Nature Center, we like to know what birds are using the property. It kind of helps us guide decisions about how to manage the habitat. Should we remove a lot of invasive species, and what kinds of things should we replace it with? Will it harm or hurt certain bird species, and so forth? A lot of bird banding was started initially and continues to this day to study bird migration, which is an extremely important part of this program and an important part of the bird banding program. They were putting bands on ducks when it was first started, and it's expanded to songbirds, and it has allowed us to piece together a lot of migration routes, figure out what habitats birds use on their way north and on their way south. It also helps us to study how long the birds live. And so, you know, how long a bird lives is important for their biology. Each year that they nest, they raise a set of young ones, and those young ones may or may not survive. And so how many years do they live tells us how many chances they have of raising young during their lifetime. So, and also it tells us if birds like to use the same spots from year to year. Do they wander around, or do birds that migrate, do they come back to nest at the same location? And we found a lot of them do, and some of them don't. And a whole bunch of other interesting life history aspects of birds can be discovered by banding birds.
And wouldn't scientists use this information for climate change information and data as well, just to kind of see what the birds are doing and how those correlate with climate change?
Well, it can be one piece of that. You know, climate change is a really huge thing, and it's been happening over time really slowly. So one data set doesn't really cover it all. If you do this in a scientific way and consistently, which we do over the years, you can look at increases and decreases. And so the bird banding that we do, we just basically collect the data, and we can also say, are the numbers telling us things increasing or decreasing? Figuring out what the cause is a little bit more complicated and takes a little bit more time.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. All right, so we had a student ask the question, how do the birds breathe in the bags?
Oh, right. Yeah, I get a question like that all the time. The bags are wiggling, and the students see them. This is one of the bird bags that I put the birds in. It probably looks a lot like a pillowcase, and the reason is because this is a pillowcase. I have made these bags out of material which is a pillowcase. It's got a drawstring on it that prevents the bird from getting out. But this is very light material, so it's actually easier to breathe through this than it is through the face mask we've been wearing. Some of the face masks make you sweat, but this is very light, so just like when you go under the covers at night, you can breathe under the covers, so the birds can breathe quite easily in the bags. And so we're not hurting the birds at all in any way. So a lot of our training is to make sure that we handle these birds safely and correctly. And so any harm to the birds is counterproductive. We do our absolute best to not have any birds get injured. We want to catch them again. We want to learn about how long they live. We want them to come back safe and healthy.
Yeah, we saw in one of the videos how the gray catbird was very vocal, and then the minute we put that gray catbird into the bag, it quieted down. So it's definitely also kind of like a little calming thing for the bird as well.
It does. It does. When they can't see their surroundings, they tend to calm down, and those vocalizations are quite variable. It sounds a little bit distressing when you hear them at first. But the birds are not necessarily all that scared. I think when you watch some of the videos, the birds are biting me quite a lot. So they're more angry and they're trying to get away. So if somebody tried to throw me or you into a sack, we'd probably yell a bit too. And so that's kind of what they're doing. And it's perfectly normal. And some individual catbirds are totally quiet, and some make a lot of noise. And then it just varies quite a lot. It's not any indication that we're hurting them at all. So that's just part of the process. And some birds are louder and some birds are quieter. And it just varies.
Just like us.
Yes. Well, I don't know anybody who would not protest by being put in a bag.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Exactly. All right. So Fatu D from East Hills Middle realized that you were collecting data on the ages of the bird. And this student just wanted to know, how can you tell how old the bird is?
Well, telling how old the birds are and whether they're males and females is what bird banders have to study before we get our license. So we have to study our field guides and be able to identify birds. And then we have to study a couple of books, which I have actually back here on my shelf. This is the bird room in my house. All of these books behind me are bird books. But these two volumes right here, don't know if it's backwards or not, Identification Guide to North American Birds. And one of these volumes is mostly songbirds, and another one is things like ducks and herons and hawks and things like that. So I kind of held this up during one of the videos. I'm not sure if it got assigned to be watched or not, but we have to study all of this information. And you know, there's not a lot of fun pictures and stuff in here. There's charts and graphs and a lot of text that tells us that, okay, when the birds are first hatched, these certain feathers are more pointy, and then they replace these feathers once or twice a year, and then as they're older, these feathers are a little bit more rounded. And so some of these are very fine details that we look at, and we did point this out in some of the videos. That when we were banding, and I don't know how well it showed up really on the camera, but a lot of different things like that. We also look at what's called skull ossification, where a bird hatched in the summertime, its skull is not completely formed, and so as the bird ages, we can tell that the bones are getting harder, and we can blow the feathers aside and see that difference. And if all else fails, we can just look at a calendar. Most birds don't nest until June, and we do our program in May, so we won't have any young birds yet. And so we can just assume that it's an adult bird. So there's like a, you know, if all else, if you can't figure it out, this is your backup position. So we have to study these, and we have to figure it out and combine things. So it's a little bit of art as well as science combined together. So, but basically we have to study all this ahead of time.
So it's definitely lots of experience, and it's not a Google question.
You cannot Google how can you age a red-winged blackbird.
Yeah.
You probably won't find it.
Yeah, I don't think so. Atlas A from Way Elementary asked, what do other watchers do when they catch a bird that is banded?
Oh, excellent question. We do occasionally catch birds that we've already banded during the program, which I think we covered that a little bit, and we looked one up to find out it was like a 4-year-old blue jay or something. We also had a 7-year-old chickadee that we caught at the nature centers. But sometimes these birds wander outside the nature center area. Other people will find them, not bird banders necessarily, but birds hit windows and get killed, and sometimes cats bring them in, and a lot of bird bands are discovered this way. And the numbers on the band are important to keep track of, all 9 numbers. There's a phone number or a website on the band, usually on the inside, and it's important to report those to the bird banding lab. And so this is a real easy thing to Google. Just Google bird banding and you can get a report page that will just pop right up, and you can fill in the information on the date you found the bird, where you found it, when, and what the numbers are. And then you'll get a certificate thanking you for that and providing you with the information about when and where the bird was banded. And then the bird bander gets information on where it was found also. I did actually get a couple of these from my other bird banding location. A bird bander that I know in Ohio said, I caught one of your northern flickers on Middle Sister Island, which is in the middle of Lake Erie, where he has a bird banding station. And I banded that bird 2 years before at Lake St. Clair Metro Park. And so we kind of connected because we knew each other, but if he did not know me, he would have entered it in, and we would have discovered that bird is still alive and still migrating, and hopefully I'll catch it again maybe this fall. So it's a very important thing for people to report birds, because that's how we put all of this information together, is by people contributing when they find a banded bird.
Mm-hmm. So information in numbers. There's not as many bird banders as there are people that have houses and apartments and are out in nature. So they're being
Right.
a key part to your process.
Exactly. And it's a really slow process, because you only get 2 pieces of information. When one person bans it and another person finds it, that's only 2 pieces of information. We don't know anything about what happened in between those 2 days or locations. There are other ways that we can find that out with the bigger birds, and I think there might be a question coming up on that a little bit later. We can talk about that too. But this is kind of like a message in a bottle kind of thing, you know. And if you're out, you want to send out 100 messages in 100 bottles if you hope somebody's going to find one of them. And that's kind of what we do with bird banding.
Yeah, that's a great analogy and a great way to put it. Samantha D. from East Hills Middle and Braden R. from West Hills Middle, they asked if bird banding is fun and if bird banding is hard.
It's a scientific process, and you have to approach it very seriously and very studiously. The license to get to be able to band birds is difficult to get, and so you have to do a lot of serious study to get it. And so in that sense, it's hard, but a lot of times hard things are fun. And there's no reason why science can't be fun. Even if you're collecting really good data, it still can be fun. And every once in a while, I will catch a bird that I have to dig out my book because I don't band them very often. This happened a couple of weeks ago. I caught a black-billed cuckoo, and I didn't remember what size band it took or how to tell the ages of cuckoos, because I've only banded about a dozen of them in my life. And so, that part's hard too, but, I have the references available. But yeah, yes, it's hard, and yes, it's fun.
I like watching it, that's for sure.
Well, it's easy to watch.
Yes. So with the band, where you were talking about sizes, and Nicholas P. from Conant asked, how do they band big birds such as an eagle?
Oh, right. Well, bald eagles are especially a different situation. In order to ban hawks, which I have done, there are migratory species that feed on birds, and you can lure them in using, fake lures and things like that because they're hunting after things that are moving. Bald eagles tend to eat dead fish a lot of times, and so it's really difficult to lure them in. Plus, because they're our national bird, they have extra protection, and so you need a special permission to be able to ban them. So you can't lure them in the normal way that you would at a hawk banding station. And so mostly this is something that Fish and Wildlife and DNR people do. And almost always what they do is they will ban the babies in the nest. It's almost impossible to catch an adult bald eagle in any way. And so mostly it's banning baby bald eagles in the nest, sometimes putting radio transmitters on them if there's a certain study that wants to look at something. And they're really big bands. I don't have a band that's big, but the band is maybe an inch or more in diameter because they have got really big legs, and you have to put it on with rivets because they have really strong beaks and they can rip them off otherwise. And so it's very specialized, and you have to climb up to their nests. You have to wear a hard hat because the adult eagles are not happy with eagle banders climbing up to their nest, and so they get attacked. And so it's a whole process, completely different from what we do at the Nature Center for banding songbirds.
Yeah, so we use the mist nets, and that's a couple questions that some of the students have. Alex M. from West Hills Middle asked if the net is sticky, and Mattia P. has any of our mist nets ever broken because of a bird?
Okay, so the nets are not sticky. They're just very, very fine and light, which one of the first videos that I'm sure that you watched, I show the net in my hand. It's like a fine hair net, okay? And so it's very light, but very strong. And so the reason the birds get caught is not because it's sticky, but because they're tangled. And so that's basically how the nets work. And while we're intending to catch songbirds, with the nets that we have, there are nets for catching hawks that are bigger and stronger when you're doing that on purpose. But every once in a while, a hawk may dive into an area where it's trying to catch a bird that's not even in the net. And I have come up to my net and I see a hole that I can tell is about as big around as a red-tailed hawk would make diving through the net. So occasionally a hawk will put a hole in a net. Also, the white-tailed deer are very, very abundant now in Michigan, which they never used to be, and they can just clumsy wander through a mist net and completely destroy it. So each mist net costs about $150 or $200, and they're, like I say, they're very delicate. A deer will totally destroy one, and a human walking through one would certainly destroy one too. But every once in a while, we see signs that maybe a hawk or something has taken a dive through a net and it puts a hole in it. But we can repair holes that are, a foot in diameter, but, a deer puts a hole about 8 feet across and can't fix that.
Speaking of cost, Lillian R. from Way Elementary asked, how much is all the bird banding materials used?
Well, like I said, the nets are, some of the longer nets can even be $200, so $150 to $200 per net. And we are opening 11 nets at the Nature Center, so you can do the math on that. At the Metro Park, where I do migration studies, we have 17 nets. Some friends of mine in Kalamazoo on 45 acres, they open 37 nets. And so the nets last 3 to 5 years or longer. So they're the most expensive item for sure. But the specialized equipment that you saw me showing, the pliers and everything, it's usually about $65 for a pair of pliers. The special rulers, about $10. And the bird bands themselves, people ask quite often, is how much do the bird bands cost? And the bird bands are free. Our tax money pays for that. It's from the U.S. Geological Survey as part of the federal government. And so that is provided to bird banders. We just have to request bands every year and account for them and put them on. And if we don't use them, we have to send them back. So unlike in Europe and Asia, Europe and specifically, their program, the bird banders there, actually, they call them ringers, not banders. They have to actually buy the bands. And I don't really know what they cost over there, but that would, to me, would limit the amount of research that you can do if you actually have to buy all of these bands. So that's pretty much the expense. And then, of course, there's travel. The poles that we have to put the nets up on, everybody does things a little bit differently. We're using conduit poles, a few dollars for one pole. We need 2 poles for each net. So, $100 or $200 for a whole bunch of poles, so it does take a little bit of investment, and it does take maintenance, and the equipment, especially the nets, do wear out. So you have to continuously keep getting new ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. And Felix W. from Conant, what do you have to do to get a bird banding license?
Right. Well, as I said, a lot of study. You need to know your birds. You need to probably apprentice with another bird bander. The bird bander who did this 4th grade program between 1990 and I'd say around 2001 was Ellie Cox, and she was my mentor. And she taught me how to band birds. I studied under her for about 10 years. I was actually not trying to become a bird bander. I was just happy to be a volunteer helping out. And then as I got more into it, she started to convince me that maybe I could do this. And so she helped train me how to band birds. And so you need the training. You need some certification. It gets harder and harder every year. And then you also have to have a valid research project. You have to have a reason to study birds. You can go out and look at birds and learn an awful lot about how many there are, where they're found, where they're nesting. You don't need a bird banding permit. You don't need to ban birds at all to learn a lot about birds. But certain things like their migrations and their longevity and a bunch of other things require that they be banded. So you have to justify that you need to do this and get a 2 or 3 ornithologists to co-sign for your training and have a valid research plan. And educational bird banding is the one thing that we do, of course, here at the E.L. Johnson Nature Center is another aspect of my plan. But they tend not to give permits anymore for just educational banding. You have to actually have some research that you're doing as well, which is I'm doing hummingbirds during the summer, and I'm doing migration monitoring at Lake St. Clair Metro Park. And so that all kind of rolls into it. So it takes a lot of study, and you have to get your license from the U.S. Government. And then after you do that, then you also have to get a license from the state, that each state that you work in, the state DNR. And for the most part, I work in Michigan, but I do some work in Ohio and Indiana, so I have to apply for permits there. The permits expire after like 1 year in Indiana, every 2 or 3 years in Ohio, and every 2 or 3 years in Michigan. And then the federal permit is usually good for 3 or 4 years. So it's constantly renewing. And if there's any reason why any of those organizations think you should not be renewed, they won't renew you. So it's a constant process, and it's a lot of administrative work, and it's a lot of paperwork, as well as, the fun of actually going out there and banding birds.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, they have to make sure that everything is done properly and safely and scientifically as well. So there has to be a process to that as well.
Exactly.
Sharika S. from East Hills and Javen Z. from Way Elementary both kind of asked the same question, who the first person was to ban birds, and how long has the bird banding been around?
Okay, so not really sure who banded the first bird. I'm not sure anybody really knows who that is, but we can go back to John James Audubon, who was a famous ornithologist. He was born in the 1780s in Haiti. He was a French guy, and he tromped around all of North America, and he created the first bird book of all the birds of North America, and he discovered a lot of the birds we see today. And he is credited, and sometime in the 1820s, I think it must have been, he's credited with, the story goes, somehow he caught an eastern phoebe, which we did band a phoebe at the Nature Center this spring. He saw it nesting on the eaves of his cabin, wondered if it was the same bird that he saw there last year. Somehow he caught it, put a little silver thread of thread around its leg, and tied it on there so it wouldn't come off, and then let it go. And lo and behold, the next year there was a phoebe with a little silver thread tied around its leg. So he confirmed that it was the same bird that came back to nest on his cabin from one year to the next. So that's kind of what we think is the beginnings of bird banding or bird marking way back in the 1820s. The official bird banding lab, I brought this up because I had to look it up on my computer. The scientific bird banding program was created under the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in 1920. And so 2020, it's 100 years now.
Wow.
And initially, for a long time, for the first few decades, it was mainly ducks. And so they were trying to work out the flyways of where the ducks would migrate to, figure out how many ducks there are so that we could tell the hunters that, okay, this year you can hunt this many ducks, but next year maybe not as many because there aren't as many ducks around. And so that's how all the bird banding got started. But sometime in the 1940s, it expanded to songbird banding. And then probably in the I'm going to say late 1980s or early 1990s, they finally figured out a way to to develop a band to put on a hummingbird. So it's been around for 100 years, and we've been adding different birds ever since. And then as the electronic age has come into its own here, we've gotten some other ways to track birds besides bands. So I think there's a couple other questions about that coming up maybe.
Yeah. And also just wanted to point out, thank you, Aaliyah C. from West Hills Middle and Ethan Z. from Conant. You also asked that question, so we wanted to do that. Yeah, so Sophia E. from West Hills Middle, she does ask about other technology. And the question is, do they put technology in the band so they can see how the birds grow and other things that we did not know?
Yeah, I remember this question. She also said that if they're not doing it, we should, and that she gets half the credit. So awesome, wanting to get credit for your invention. It has been invented already, though, so sorry, Sophia. Somebody else has the credit for that. They do not actually put the technology into the bands themselves. The bands are just a metal ring that we put on the bird's leg, but there are a lot of technologies now where we can put a transmitter on a bird, and there are a bunch of different ways to do this. There's something that we can actually glue onto the side of a bird band, and it actually registers sunrise and sunset, and it gathers this data, and it can actually determine the GPS coordinates every day where that bird is. With those, they're called geolocators. You have to catch the bird again, take that little thing off of there, which it's about the size of a small jelly bean or even smaller, and you have to plug it into a computer and download the data. So what they've done recently is they discovered the wintering grounds of a black swift, which is a western bird in North America. They had no idea where it was spending the winter, and they put geolocators on 15 of them on the nesting grounds. They nest behind waterfalls in the western mountains. Interesting way to get at those, but they managed to get 2 of them back, and they found out that they spend the winter in western Amazonia in Brazil, and so they downloaded that. There's limitations on size. You can't put things on a bird that weigh too much. There are transmitters that are about as big as a deck of cards that have an antenna on them that they put on hawks and owls and seabirds like albatrosses, and those will actually transmit live up to satellites. And so there's a lot of technology out there that also, snowy owls are being fitted with transmitters that use the cell phone towers, except that they breed in the Arctic. So when they're up in the Arctic, they're gathering data on the GPS locations like as much as once a minute. And then when they come back down into cell tower range, they download thousands of pieces of data to the researchers' cell phones, which I was told about this one researcher was both excited and disturbed that his owl was back, and that he had like 18,000 text messages about where it had been. So this technology is out there, but to be able to track a bird as small as a warbler or even a hummingbird that way, we don't have that technology yet. So it's got to get even smaller so that the birds don't have to struggle to carry the tracking device around with them. We want to make sure the birds can move around freely with no hindrances for whatever we do with them.
Yeah, you want to make sure that the band is just a part of it and not a challenge to it, definitely.
Yeah, in fact, there is actually a standard that nothing that you put on a bird can weigh more than 5% of the weight of the bird. And so when you've got a hummingbird that weighs 3 grams, we're talking less than 0.3 of a gram. We're talking what, 0.1 gram. And so the lightest transmitters now weigh probably 2 grams. And so that's like 60% of the weight of the bird, of a hummingbird, not 5%.
Yeah.
So that's the standard. And even some of these bigger ones that are like the size of a deck of cards, like I say, they have to actually when they put them on snowy owls, for example, they have to weigh the owl first and say, well, is this bird heavy enough to hold this? And sometimes they have to, just put a metal band on and let it go. And we can't put a transmitter on this bird because it doesn't weigh enough. So,
yeah.
Sometimes it's a little bit more critical and precise than that.
Yeah. Abigail A. from Conan Elementary, she does ask, when birds are banded, are they banded forever?
The metal band does stay on forever. It's aluminum, and it's designed to not be able to be removed by the bird. It's very, very light. They don't really know it's there after a very short period. And it doesn't fit tight on the leg, as I think we saw in some of the videos. So it's not causing them any distraction or harm. So that is kind of the whole point, is to make sure it stays on until somebody maybe catches it. Maybe somebody never will, but it is on the bird for the rest of its life. I have one on me as well. This is called a wedding ring. And since I've gotten older and a little bit thicker, let's say, this is not coming off. I can't remove it anymore. So, humans wear things forever too, and the birds wear the bands forever. These tracking devices that are the electronic ones, those tend to weigh a little bit more, and they are actually designed to fall off after a while. So some of them will fall off after a year or less. The straps that are put on, they put them on like a little backpack around the bird's wings, and they can still flap their wings and all that, but the materials that it's made out of will actually dissolve and decay after a certain period of time. And so some of those things are not designed to be on them forever, but the aluminum bands are in fact designed to be put on the bird and stay on it for its entire life.
I just wanted to share with the students my screen now of just some more information about just, I guess, what we were saying, making sure that the kids get outside, go with your families as well. There's birds there, and you can hear them, and then you can see them. Wanted to share, just remember those bird resources that we've been showing throughout these lessons. Going to allaboutbirds.org, birdscornell.edu, audubon.org are really great resources to get you involved. And one thing that we also shared was the Merlin app as well, to be able to identify a bird based on the size and the colors that you see and what that bird was doing.
Right. That'll go through birdscornell.edu.
Yep. Follow the Johnson Nature Center on social media, because we do definitely advocate for things that are going on, not just in the bird world, but everywhere else. We have information on those pages for social media, and let your families know that the trails are now open at the Nature Center. They opened yesterday, June 1st. The trail hours on the weekdays are 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and the weekends, the trails are open from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. The building itself is still closed and the restrooms are still closed, but again, you can go on the trails, and the birds that you see in your neighborhood. You might see at the nature center, you might see or hear different ones.
And just related to the social media, I just wanted to ask you, Cass, if we didn't answer your question of all the 400 fourth graders that are hopefully watching this, there might still be another question or a follow-up or something. Is there? Could they just go through that social media and just post the question there, and then somehow you guys can either answer it on your own, probably, or you can get the question back to me, and I can, we can just go back and forth, through social media. I'm not on Facebook, but I do emails, and so we can continue to answer questions that continue to come up if you'd like.
Yes, a big part of what Alan and I do is we want to answer questions and continue to provoke and excite not just kids, but everybody about being outdoors. So any questions, yes, shoot them over to the social media page. Or you'll also see that in continuing lessons, if you have any questions, email your teachers and they'll send it to me if they can't answer it, or if you can't answer it as well. You as in the student, will be able to answer it for you. Yep, that's great.
If I can't answer it, it's a really, really good question.
Yes, definitely. Yep. Of course, thank you to Alan Chartier, the bird bander, but also to the fourth grade team of teachers who were able to give us information about the lessons that you guys all wanted. So those teachers, thank you so much for being supportive of that.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, so that's where we were able to give the lessons to, and for you kiddos to have them. The bird guides that did the bird banding help with Alan were there as well to help get birds out of the mist nets carefully, and so that Alan could bird band them. So we had those 3 guides there to do that. And then definitely all the behind the scenes stuff that had to do with the technology and the video recording. So we had lots of people involved in this. So we want to thank them as well.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you students so much for being a part of this program. This was done differently. I learned a lot from doing it this way. And
yeah, I did too, but none of it had to do anything to do with birds. I learned a lot about technology and streaming and all that stuff.
Yeah, so thank you all students for being a part of this program. And I think that's it, right?
Yep. Thanks very much. Hope to see you out on the trails.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Okay, thanks. Bye.